Welcome to the Recruitment Mentors podcast. My name is Hisham Azuz. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Nathan Darnel, who is the founder of Source Control, who are an expert tech recruitment business specializing in distributed systems. And this business he launched in January this year. Before that, Nathan successfully climbed the ranks to associate director and along the way won multiple awards like Top Biller and Consultant of the Year awards back to back in 2018 and 2019 at his previous company that he worked for, Oakwell Hampton. And now Nathan has big goals, big plans to grow his own recruitment business with Source Control. Nathan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. A lovely introduction.
Yes, I'm excited to go over this with you. So obviously we're going to talk about recent times, you being a business owner, but we're going to have a real good conversation on you being a biller, getting that top biller award and these types of things. But the first question I want to ask you and where we start is, in your opinion, what characteristics and traits do you think make up a highly successful recruitment consultant?
Yeah, I mean, I thought quite a lot about this question, and it's hard to kind of stay away, I suppose, from the cliches that you'd normally hear in terms of kind of determination, resilience, goal-orientated, self-belief. But I think to be successful, it comes down to, or one of the main factors is kind of a large dose of individuality. I think everyone can bring various different kind of strengths to the table, and it's knowing how to leverage those strengths to kind of your advantage. I mean, some people I've seen in the past be, fantastic at writing the perfect BD email and weaker at the phones. But I think it's kind of a combination of playing to your strengths, but doing the other stuff anyway. It's like it's spinning those plates and being kind of, having the awareness to know that brilliant. You look, this is my main tactic, for example, but I'm also going to do the other things that I need to do to make sure I'm being successful, which could be the cold calling, the BD and stuff like that. Yeah, so that would be the kind of my key takeaway. Obviously, those other buzzwords I mentioned are equally as important. The resilience side, because there's massive good days and awful bad days. Determination, kind of setting the goals, knowing what you want to achieve, and going out there to try and achieve those goals. And yeah, just belief in yourself that you can do it. The glass ceiling is what you make it, I suppose, and it's most certainly easy to smash through it if you've got the right the right kind of set of beliefs behind you.
I love that. Individuality, is that obviously, I think another word that a lot of people use is authentic, right? And I know it's like you spoke about in an interesting way, but I guess, how do you think people can uncover their individuality? Because I think that's interesting.
I think again, there's probably no right or wrong answer for that. It really comes down to yourself and what you're good and strong at, and it's normally a kind of you have to do it by trial and error. Sometimes you just got to there's in any business when you're joining a business, when you're starting off in recruitment, whether you've got a couple of years experience or a lot of years experience, it's still always a learning curve, and it's always about kind of for me variating things and just trying things in different ways, in new ways, and learning what works for you, because what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for the person sat next to you, and vice versa. But it's always good to kind of leverage the advice of your peers and be able to try and put that into practice and just work out for yourself, is that what I'm good at, what I'm strong at, or is that somewhere potentially I need to develop? And most importantly as well, alongside that, it's being coachable. It's leaning probably on the advice of your peers, because they'll be able to identify and potentially spot strengths and weaknesses within you that you can potentially improve on.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess what you're also talking about there is self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you think sort of Nathan early on in his career, and I love that you also mentioned there around always being open to learn. Like, I think anyone listening to this definitely has that mindset. And I think it's the mindset that most top billers will share, besides the ones that obviously have a huge ego and think they've completed recruitment. Yeah. But I definitely think there's a lot less of those people, in my opinion. But like, I don't know, I'm just curious as we're here, and then we'll go into other things. But like, how do you feel like, have you always been someone that's been self-aware? How have you cultivated your self-awareness out of interest?
Absolutely not. It was I've had to learn through mistakes, and for me personally, yeah, I understood what my purpose, what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to achieve, and I'd always set myself those goals that I wanted to progress to that next level, to go from consultant to senior consultant through and upwards. And at certain points throughout my career, in all honesty, I had to have difficult conversations with the powers that be and the directors above me in regards to even simple things about doing the basics, attitude, just those general things around that. And sometimes I've had to adapt, change, learn, and grow from that. To be able to achieve what I've wanted to achieve personally, because without those changes, I probably wouldn't have been given the opportunities that I have done so far. I'm not telling people to change themselves fundamentally, because, as I say, that plays back into the individuality. But it's more about how do you learn and adapt and take on that feedback and grow from that feedback to make yourself a better rounded individual, not just as a recruiter, but somebody that's in the office as well. Because as you move up in the ranks, so do people lean to you for more advice and look at you as a bit more of a role model within a business. So it's really important, as I say, that you take that on board and kind of run with it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So 2014 then,
Yep.
entered the recruitment world. Similar background. So it looks like you was a life insurance broker. I was a personal lines insurance broker, so selling people car insurance and all that good stuff. So tell us about, obviously, that the world that I came from. I don't know what it was like for you, maybe a bit different than life insurance, but like it was super transactional, like the world that I was coming in. I wanted to expand my sales skills and get in a more of a consultant position and deal with bigger deal values and things like that. But describe to us your first year in recruitment. What was that like? How would you describe that?
It was a bit of a baptism of fire. In fairness, a big learning curve, as you've kind of mentioned there. In insurance sales and such, and many sales jobs, it's very transactional. It's very kind of process driven. So you follow it to a process, and hopefully at the end of that process, you get someone's bank details and you're happy. Whereas when you're when coming into recruitment, there was just so much more to take into consideration, because you're no longer selling a product that either works or it doesn't. You're dealing with people, and they're one of the most volatile commodities out there, because everyone's got their own opinions. They've got their own kind of key indicators that they need to tick off and stuff like that. So it was more for me kind of a big adjustment in learning the psychology around recruitment first and foremost, but also trying to get a better understand people and people's needs. And as I say, it's until you know what somebody needs, it's really hard to sell against that.
Yeah. And what was the environment that you went into? Was it a small business or?
Yeah, there was small to medium kind of business. I reckon there's probably about 30 of us at the peak. It was probably a bit of a diverse kind of recruitment culture. So we had a couple of different revenue streams. So it wasn't just technology orientated. So I was part of the technology team, but we also had white collar and blue collar engineering and apprenticeship programs as well. But it was still one big team, albeit obviously working in different kind of revenue streams.
So I guess looking back, just two things. I just want to know from you, what was your sort of biggest challenge in the sort of, it doesn't have to be specifically the first year, but early on in that first company that you worked for. And then I want to know sort of what your best sort of piece of advice would be for anyone listening to this that's early on in their recruitment career. So let's go to the challenges first. Like, I guess so you mentioned a bit about there, what you had to adapt to, the psychology and things like that, but any other challenges and obstacles that you had to work through early on?
It was just for me, probably coming into it was a bit of a stark difference in terms of the level of professionalism that was required. I'd been in sales environments where things got pretty wild at times, and it was kind of high risk, high reward type environments and such like that. But coming into recruitment, for me, the big culture shock and the big challenge was kind of changing certain kind of areas of myself and my sales process and my behaviors and such to kind of modify and fit into this recruitment environment.
And I really had to do the same, and I just really got into like my sales basically? Like, how did you, obviously, I'm assuming that you sort of spoke to people around you and your peers, but like, how did you go about upskilling yourself besides learning on the job out of
Yeah,
interest?
it was again. I was lucky to have some close friends that were in recruitment that actually gave me the
Okay.
kind of the nudge and the insight. And basically, one of my best friends called me up, and he was living down in Bristol at the time, working for Opus Recruitment, and he'd got probably
Sold you
like
the dream.
yeah, he did. He did. He just called me up, and it was pretty quick, easy to sell me the dream. He just said, this is the job that you're probably meant to do, mate. So definitely look
Really?
into it. Yeah, and then the next week I had 5 interviews, and I just kind of committed to that. So for me, it was probably a pivotal change from where I was looking from, just the general sales jobs that I've been a part of previously, and now looking to where can I make a career, where can I grow something long term, and really, really expand on that. Because I mean, I was only 23, 24 coming into recruitment. That's late by some people's standards. When you've got graduates and such like that. So I knew that next move for me was something that I was going to stick to and something I was going to dedicate myself to, because the last thing I wanted to be doing is a couple of years in and being back on the drawing board and thinking, okay, that didn't work out for me, what's next?
What's next? Yeah. So I guess to round that off, then, like, anyone listening, like, if you could go back and speak to Nathan early on, like, what advice would you give him, do you think?
Yeah, I would probably just tell him to believe in trust in the process and follow the process. It's really easy to hear things sometimes but not listen, and kind of make assumptions and hear probably what you want to hear, and or maybe kind of glaze over the things you don't want to hear, because simply it adds that a little bit of concern into something. But just to be really thorough. Throughout the whole kind of process, from the candidate management to the client management and everything in between, because it's so easy for something to slip through the gaps and for you to miss something that's going to come back to bite you later. And second to that, probably the best advice I could give myself would be not to spend the commission until I receive it. Just because you always live in kind of a couple of paychecks in advance going, right, I'm going to have a big month, and that can come back to bite you if you've not been thorough, and obviously something adverse has happened as a result.
Yeah. And on that, and then we'll sort of start talking about sort of overall your sort of billing career as an employee. But like, just on that, because we hear this a lot on here, like, trust the process, don't let things slip through the gap. Obviously, you've been in a leadership capacity in your obviously the last company you worked for, leading a team. Where do you think, and I guess you can draw on any part of your journey really, but where do you think sort of recruiters maybe early on in their career can sometimes let things slip, you think, throughout the process, out of interest, just to go a bit more deeper and practical on that?
Yeah, it's just the attention to the finer parts of the detail. I think most businesses, every business at least I've been a part of, have a certain way of doing things, in terms of from candidate registration through to client, kind of taking a job order and everything in there in between. So it's just making sure that you are 100% thorough on that. You're not just taking necessarily people's first answers. You're exploring that in a little bit more detail. I mean, some things that would bite me back in, way back when would be, somebody would say, look, I'm happy to relocate. And I'd be like, brilliant, relocate. I'm going to send you this job because you're going to relocate.
Not a candidate, relocation. Yeah.
Exactly. But then it's going, that next line of questioning. Okay, so what's the practicalities behind that? What's your lease agreement like? Where have you got a family? Have you got children? Do you have to take them out of school? Do you have to do this? And it's just understanding, the reality behind the dream, I suppose. Because sometimes it's like, this guy looks amazing. He's amazing. He's going to send him. He's going to get the job. And again, it's because I probably didn't want to know that level of detail, because in my head I just thought it was they were good enough for it.
Yeah. No, interesting. So look, let's just talk about your sort of billing career as a whole, before you started your own business. I guess, look, as I said to you before we started this, most recruiters that we speak to, and when we try and find out from them sort of where they are today and where they want to go when they join the community, most people will say and put down that they want to be the top biller, right? And as I mentioned in this introduction, you managed to hold that title sort of back to back when you was at Oakwell Hampton in 2018, 2019, right? So I think, look, fair to say, recruitment's a really competitive environment internally as well as externally. So let's try and unpack that, and there'll be different things that we can go into. But I guess my first question for you really is, obviously loads of competition internally. Like why do you think you was able to achieve that within that business? Do you think? What did you do differently?
I think there was a couple of different kind of reasons. I mean, just being completely frank and honest, my performance whilst I was in my first two companies, it started off strong. It probably plateaued a little bit, probably got a little bit complacent. And then it was coming into my last role really where things started accelerating. There's a couple of different reasons as to that. So a couple of subtle changes probably I made in terms of my own process to kind of help escalate that. But, I just knew I was probably more focused than I'd ever been in knowing what I wanted to achieve and breaking that down into chunks of, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is where I need to be by this date, and so on and so forth. So I kind of worked backwards from my end goal, but tried to stick to that as rigidly as possible, I suppose. But yeah, kind of a big change and pivot for me was in the way that I try to attract candidates.
Okay.
So historically, I mean, I was doing probably 120, 130k a push, in a market that I had been in for quite a while, and I was really relying on the tools that I was provided. So I was relying on the job boards. I was relying on pretty much the job boards. It was just
really?
and just really kind of looking there, and to be fair, the amount of offers I had versus the amount of business that actually stuck was ridiculous. I was missing out on 90k in a year of offers that didn't end up landing.
Wow.
And I suppose, just to give a bit of background on the just a quick snip of the journey, we went and did a recruitment out in America for a while. And that we didn't have the same tools we had available when I was working in a London market that I was familiar with. So I had to really kind of develop new methods of reaching candidates, a lot more kind of headhunting, calling people in the office, more heavily reliant on LinkedIn. So when I came back to the UK to kind of pick up where I'd left off, I now came back to that market with a new set of skills. And that just immediately that small pivot and small change in the way that I went about my business made a massive impact, because it meant that those offers that I was generating still were sticking, because the candidates that I was finding had been purposefully headhunted rather than being the best available at that time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that. Appreciate you filling us in there on the context. So just to add to that, how long was you in America for?
So it was only 6 months. So I didn't actually get a chance to move out there because I was pending marriage with my wife at the time, and yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't physically on the ground, but I was working remotely, and I did go and spend some time in our LA office as well.
Nice. So basically, what you're sharing with us then is that like you really added the sort of added a lot more tools to your toolbox in terms of the way of doing things. So I really appreciate the honesty in that. So let's just break that down a bit. So when you say headhunting and calling people in the office, I get that. Like, just talk to us a bit about like what that actually looks like, and why has that then ended up working for you? Is it because you're literally directly calling people and going, hey, I'm currently working with an organization that has actually told me that they want you in their business? Like, I don't know, just talk to us a bit about that actual approach.
Yeah, so it's less probably cloak and dagger. I think when I was trained on how to do that, or at least when people told me, it was always the carrot and the stick type situation. So it was always go in there and make them feel kind of that they've been individually selected by the employer. But that's not the case. So I've always gone down in with an honesty approach when it comes to headhunting. But it's more for me been about mapping out businesses, because what I realized as well is a keyword search and a Boolean search is fantastic. It's going to give you all these great developers and stuff to look at, but naturally, if they're coming up in your search, they're coming up in everyone else's search. So it was more understanding, okay, brilliant. So if this guy's working at this company with this skill set, then sure enough, there's going to be more people in that company, because some people, when you're trying to identify them on LinkedIn, their presence is very minimal. States of employment, they may not even have any keywords or anything like that, but they're still probably equally as good, if not potentially better, than the people that are coming in up in your search that do have a more profound and flushed out LinkedIn profile or presence online. So it was more about kind of mapping companies and understanding where the hotspots were for the skills that I was looking for. And then, as I say, making those introductions quite directly on the phone. My process has always been to achieve a little, but a lot of times, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So not to go into a headhunting call with the objection of winning a candidate over and selling them the dream on that call. Going into that call with a simpler objective of getting a mobile number from them to give them a call back after work when it's more convenient.
Nice. That yeah. So switch the objective. That's interesting, because I guess you're more motivated to make those calls because it's not a failure if you don't get a yes, I want to talk to you about that job. It's just more of
Yeah.
would you mind give us would you mind just talking a bit, because I know people love this sort of stuff.
Yep.
Would you mind just sharing a bit around like the script?
Yeah. So
What's like the opener basically? If you call me, I'm sitting at my desk, I'm someone that, you know, at some point there's a good chance that there'll be jobs that I might be open to. I've got the right skill set. Like, you catch me at work, obviously it's a completely different environment now, so it'd be good to get your thoughts on how this has changed. But if I'm in the office and you get my number, you call me directly, what's the opening?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, hopefully you'll be able to hear me, because I try and just do as quick an elevator pitch as possible. So because I'm very conscious that when you land on that desk phone, they might be sat next to the CTO, you might be interrupting a scrum meeting, you know, anything. You don't know what's going on around you. So I try and encourage them to speak as little as possible. So my two objectives are them to say, probably to speak twice on the call. The first time is to acknowledge that that's them who I'm speaking to make sure I'm not pitching their boss. And the second objective is to agree for a callback and hopefully get an alternative contact number from them if I am calling them on the desk line or what have you. So my normal introduction to that would be quick, just a very quick introduction to myself. So it'd be, hi, you know, I'm Nathan Darnel. I'm giving you a call from Source Control. Straight away, sorry, I apologize. It was firstly asking if that's, I'd say, hi, is that James? Brilliant.
Yeah, sure.
James. Yeah, hi, it's Nathan Darnell. I'm giving you a call from Source Control, and then straight into the micro pitch, which is just look. The reason I'm giving you a call today, I'm a specialist technical headhunter. I specialize in this area. Very, very quick glazing over that, but then bring it straight back to a personalization about them, because you know, if I'm going in there cold with no information, then they're gonna detect that straight away. So it's more identifying, because you know, at this point you've got the LinkedIn profile hopefully in front of them. You can see something about them, and it's picking on a certain unique selling point about them that you can sell back to them, to show that you're well researched, to show that you've done your homework and you're genuinely interested in having that conversation. That can range from, oh, brilliant, I can see you've been at X company for 5 years now, you know, that's really, really impressive. Look, I just wanted to speak to you about this. It could be X, you know, I see you working with X, Y, and Z technology. That really interests me. A lot of people as well, you'll notice when you're browsing lots and lots of LinkedIn profiles, you know, people like to give information. People are passionate about what they're doing, and they'll detail that in their profile. So it might be that they're working with X, Y, and Z technology, but they've mentioned, you know, I've got an interest in this. If you've got a position that you know will play on that interest, then it's about letting them know about that. But again, it's probably diluted it a little bit there in terms of the context, but it's a very quick introduction. So
You did. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
I think
So
the key there is the personalization bit and
yeah,
picking on.
it is. It's just making it, but it's also showing empathy as well. So as I say, once I've quickly introduced myself, as soon as they hear technical headhunter, straight away, you know, nerves are probably going to come up. You know, they might have the hairs on the back of the neck. They're breathing heavier because the CTO, as I say, or whoever's stood near them, you know, straight away diffusing out. Look, I'm really apologise for calling you so directly at work. The reason I'm calling you, and then it's the justification. Back then to the empathy at the end. Again, I apologise for contacting you directly. However, I would love to have a conversation with you outside of business hours. Look, what's the best way for me to reach you? Simple as that.
Yeah. Is that the close? Is that the like closer of like just saying, hey, okay.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's basically, as I say, that pitch from start to finish, you know, will generally last about 30 seconds. So,
yeah, nice.
You know, they're having to pick up the phone, and hopefully they can walk away from that without, you know, somebody going, oh, who was that? Because, you know, they've not had to answer anything. They can just say, oh, rubbish off, as it was nothing. Because I found if you start trying to ask them and open them up, they straight away close down. So
yeah, that's a very good point.
You better.
How do you get their mobile then?
That's it. So I'll ask them, look, do you have an alternative number I can call you back on? Sometimes 9 times out of 10 or 5 times out of 10, they'll just give you the number just to get you off the phone, and then you call back at 5 o'clock and they've got no interest in it whatsoever. But at least you've got that kind of, that channel of communications opened up, and and you can start to build on that. Because as I say, with headhunting, it's not an overnight job. Not everyone's going to be looking straight away.
Yeah.
But the more you do it, the wider your network gets. And those are the really good candidates to have that you can just draw back on, months and months later, and think, who did I speak to about that? And then you can go back, because they're passive candidates at the end of the day. So you knock back on that door again. This time you've got the personal number, hopefully, and you're saying, look, I'm just recalling our conversation 6 months ago. Remember you mentioned this? I've got now this opportunity, and hopefully it goes from there.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for going into so much detail. And then look, as we're on this, I know we're going into deep dive in this, but I know people like the real practical things. How has this approach changed?
With lockdown.
How, because obviously I'm sure it's changing now. Like a real common sort of work dynamic seems like a hybrid approach, but I'm sure there's a lot of people still doing remote. So I don't know, how have you sort of been flexible with that?
It's become a lot more expensive. Just in terms of how to kind of aggregate data and get the data, because obviously there's a plethora of tools out there available for you to utilize on subscription basis, free basis, whatever, that's Sales QL, Lushers, all of these kind of tools, AI databases which can scrape and aggregate data. But the simple fact of the matter is it's tough. If they're not at work, and you can't get through to them, you've got to go in. You've got to again variate your style and try something new. The massive rise that I've seen, a big pivotal change that I've noticed and that I've had to try and adapt as much as possible as I can do, is more about the outbound and email marketing. How to personalize approaches there, and as I say, it's not. Hand on heart, it's not my strongest suit. I can deliberate over an email for 20 minutes thinking, is this going to hit the mark? And again, I've sat next to people that, within a couple of, 2-3 minutes, they've written something amazing that's really good and captures the attention. So again, it's constantly just trying to, add to your artillery really, and constantly trying to build and improve. But there has been a huge seismic shift, I would say, in terms of how you can contact people. It's 2 ways though, because at the end of the day, if you can get the contact information for them, the chances are they are sat at home, so they can take the call. So it takes away that awkwardness straight away. So
you can ask more open questions, and hopefully.
Normally, yes, the conversation will possibly last more than 30 seconds, because they might go, okay, yeah, we'll talk about it now, which is brilliant.
Yeah, sure. Okay, interesting. So obviously, what you shared there and why we spoke about that was because before you had that experience in America where you was building things from scratch, you being very honest and saying, look, I was billing 120, 130 grand a year, and a lot of the time I was using job boards. That means I was mainly tapping into the job seeker market, which also meant that I'm assuming, you got more offers, but a lot of these people were obviously getting other offers as well, right? So what you shared with us is that you added this tool to your toolbox, and it had a real impact. I guess let's just tie all together then. So when you got the top biller award, what did you end up billing? And then I want to speak to you about the client side, because that's always something that people want to talk about and want to improve. So just to put that into context.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the first year joining the business, kind of February to December, it was about 185k kind of offer and accepted. We were around about 160 started, which again isn't, it's not life-changing numbers in a lot of different industries. But well, I suppose that's it on that.
Well, it's a big improvement for you. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
So the best year that you had when you were on the top biller was just under 200 grand?
No, like since the year following that, again, it was in excess of 200,000. But
nice.
I think I brought a kind of a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, because I'd leaving one company and having done 6 months in America in a new market, that kind of didn't really reflect what my capabilities were over a 12-month period in a consistent market. So when I was interviewing for the job, maybe I embellished something slightly by 5 or 10k here or there in terms of what I was capable of. So I knew that going into that business, I've got now a target on my head, and I've put that target on my own head. So this is the level I said I can deliver at. So now I need to deliver at that level. And it was more knowing. It's again, I kind of look at it as a glass ceiling in terms of, you know, you're totally capable. I've seen lots of people really over exceed on regular occasions because, you know, that it's limiting belief that will stop you from potentially going that next step further and going from that 1 deal to 2 deals to 3 deals a month.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then, so I guess talking about the client side, spoke a lot around the candidate piece. This seems to be the area that typically recruiters will share, and it's a lot of the questions that I get on like where people want to improve. It seems. So what's been your journey with bringing on clients and winning business? Like, how have you improved in that department? Was there anything else that you sort of really opened up to? So I'm assuming in America you had to win business and stuff. Anything that you sort of improved on which you wasn't doing early on in your career that's had a real impact, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's experience accounts for quite a lot. You know, you do this job day in, day out, and so naturally, you know, you refine things that maybe didn't work so well in the past and improve upon things and get more confident as well in terms of what you're doing first and foremost, but also the sell. For BD, for me, I've always been quite phone centric. So I've always been quite cold call led, quite you know, just calling up, not necessarily when there's even any business there, you know, so not chasing leads. I just have a big list of people that I want to speak to because I know that they're in my industry. And it's one of them. It's just understanding that you need multiple touch points, I suppose. You know, sometimes you can get on a call and brilliant, you win a job first time, and you're like, you know, it's most of the time when that happens, I'm scrambling for a pen because I'm just not expecting it. You know, you kind of call and to introduce yourself, and they're like, okay, I'm going to take a job spec now, and I'm ruffling around, and I'm trying to get the LinkedIn up at the same time. But yeah, I think for me, I've kind of the way I've thrived is by having, I suppose, a fairly close knit group of clients that I know are regular hirers. And I have to, you know, I still do and maintain, you know, a good level of BD consistently. But I would normally gravitate towards, you know, a pool of clients that I've built good relationships with and that I kind of can grow on and expand on. And that they can then trust me with delivery rather than it being, you know, because a lot of BD, I suppose, going into it is, I promise you I can do this. You know, I swear to you, I'm going to give you the best candidates and X, Y, and Z and selling them the dream. But I think really where BD is, where I suppose I've grown and seen the most benefit is from growing those client relationships over time, delivering on your word and being consistent with it as well. And as I say, not overstretching yourself. Sometimes you're fighting a losing battle, and you know it's difficult because as a leader, I've been told, you know, to be fairly cutthroat with people and be saying, okay, well look, that's not yielding any results. Move on. And sometimes, you know, it's hard to take your own advice because, as I say, you know, if you work and invest into something, you know, and you make that progress with it, it's hard to sometimes walk away from it and think and cut your losses and go, actually, no, this isn't the right company or opportunity or the conditions aren't right. But again, I don't know if this is kind of going away from the point, but it's more the stronger relationship that you have with a client, a company, whatever, the more influence you have. It's very hard to jump into a recruitment process and start telling them how to do their job or how to change things that's going to necessarily benefit you or the candidate or what have you. But once you've worked consistently with people, they know your abilities and they know what you can do, they're much more receptive to take your influence and your guidance on things that you can change, extradite, you know, sometimes even remove entirely, you know, to make the process more fluid.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I guess what we're talking about here, which I'm going to ask you just to go a bit more deeper on, because I think this is what a lot of people will really benefit from. Because what you're talking about there is where you've really improved is sort of getting away from doing just spot business, people call it, or for a worse analogy, just one night stands, right? With businesses, you do that. And then, as you said, you may leave that relationship with credibility because you delivered on your word, but if you're not doing any other business with them, then there's still lack of influence. I don't know what sort of relationship that is. Maybe it's still a bit more transactional, whereas what you're talking about is, yeah, actually working with maybe less clients and making sure that these clients know that you're the person that can support them with their growth. You're building relationships, and then, as you said, you can then sort of impact and influence the process, which not only benefits them, but benefits you, and obviously attracting people and taking people through that process. I think this is something that I'm hearing a lot from recruiters, where also, again, they feel like they need to improve, because I think it's very easy to get excited by that, sort of by those terms getting signed, and then it can be on to the next one, right? Yeah. Or I'm always looking. So I guess what I'm just keen to ask you is, I guess, yeah, how have you got better, one, at sort of identifying businesses that you think could make for a great relationship long term, that I'm assuming will get more confident in spending more time with them, because you feel like in the long term there'll be more than just one hire, two hires, etc. And then two, just talk a bit about, we always hear this word relationship, but like, how can recruiters listen to this actually build like long-term relationships with their clients? Like, how do we actually do that? But yeah, that's what I was keen to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to kind of establishing, obviously, a kind of target audience and target list of clients, I mean, that's kind of, recruitment 101 is knowing your audience. It's taking the time when you're building a market, because naturally, most people are coming into cold markets, swapping markets that have not been in the past. It's doing your due diligence, knowing who the players are, the big movers and shakers are in your industry, and always having that kind of list of priority clients that you would love to crack into. It's my old boss used to always kind of really drill it into our heads that it was the 6 touch points. With any client, as time goes on, if you keep knocking on that door, after 6 times, hopefully it's going to open for you. Whereas most people get disinterested for the 3rd knock, they'll abandon it. But it's the people that are consistently knocking and knocking and knocking that are, that eventually, even if it's to tell you to bugger off, they're still going to answer that door at some point.
And just quickly on this, sorry to butt in.
Yep.
First thing, again, I think you're doing a really great job of keeping this really practical. One, I know it may seem really basic and simple to you, but one, how do you keep track of like I know we say market mapping, it's simple, but like, how do you do that out of interest? Like, are you set up with notifications and industry news and like, I don't know, just one on that. And then two, you hear these 6 points and 7 points, 12 points or whatever, but like, I think people sort of sometimes are unsure on like what to knock with. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, so that's what I just wanted to ask you. Sorry to butt in.
No, I mean, you slipped my mind the first question you just mentioned there, because I was focused on the second question. So what was the first one again?
The first one was just like, I know it may seem like really second nature to you, but you said keeping track of like the top things. So how do you actually do that out of interest? Like, what have been the...
Again, I've had to throughout my career start lots of new markets. So especially at my time at Oakwell, and when I was just prior to leaving, I was kind of hotbedding markets for new consultants to come into. So I'd kind of go in there and get them off the ground. And my first point of call would be CV stripping. Getting on LinkedIn, just putting basic Boolean searches in to find the skills that are attractive to my market audience, and then going through those companies, one by one, and meticulously adding them to a database or what have you. What I found since then is, and I suppose a couple of other tools. There's a wealth of different tools and available out there in the market that help to give you that edge in insight. Things like Talent Ticker, for example, Sourcebreaker, all these kind of things that hopefully, if you're working in a fairly sized or a decent organization, you'll have access to one or two of them. Looking at LinkedIn news feeds, making sure you've got alerts and watchdogs set up for hiring trends in your demographic, all those kind of things. So the information, it's not something that gets overnight. It's something that you will build and build and build. Because, it's all really exciting. You come into a new market, okay, you type in .NET developers, and all of a sudden, there's 500 vacancies that have just been posted. And you're like, brilliant, at Kid in the Candy Shop. There's loads and loads of companies that I can go after now. But you have to do that. You're doing that search every day, every week, for the rest of the time that you're in that market, and you'll slowly notice the that list is no longer 500. There's only 5 or 10 fresh ones that are coming up every week. So, but it's identifying the ones that are consistently there, the ones that are always hiring and such like that, and just making subtle notes of it. When you talk about obviously breaking down those 6 touch points. So again, it's phone conversation. I've always been predominantly phone led. But so my first touch point would always be a phone call. See if I can firstly get through to them. If I do, brilliant. Then introducing myself, seeing how far that will get with. I can get with that. Then it's backing that up with an email, which is a service overview. Look, thank you for your time, brilliant. I had a great time talking to you. This is who I am. This is what I do. And then it's just the following up again, because you might call them again 3 weeks later, a month later, 2 months later, whatever that may be, whatever you've agreed with them at the time. And the door may still be closed, but again, it's following again up with an email after that call, and then just being regular in it, and just repeat. There's no exact science to it, because there's so much luck sometimes that's involved with recruitment as well.
Sure.
It can just be, it can be the right timing, but the more you put, the more opportunities the more you contact them, and the more you're there, the more opportunities hopefully you're going to create for yourself. If not today, but tomorrow, and they will remember you, because the first call I make to somebody, it's brief. They tell me that they're not interested. Brilliant. Okay. And within a week, I've been forgotten about 100%. But then I call back 3 weeks ago and I reference, it's about taking, I suppose, even if it's a small, but taking a bit, one piece of information as a minimum from each call, and building on that each time. So it could be, I just try to say, okay, brilliant. Look, I know you're working with recruiters at the moment. Just out of curiosity, what do you normally work to recruiters at? With recruiters at? And they might say 15%. I make a note of that the next call. Oh, look, last time we spoke, you mentioned that you're working with some recruiters at 15%. And it's just dropping that in, and it's giving context to the information that you've accumulated, that then starts triggering. By the time you call them for the 4th time, they're like, all right, Nathan, look, there's no more jobs. I've told you before, but they remember you, and it's just about getting them to remember you, because then hopefully the 5th time, when everyone else has given up, they go, actually, something's just come up. We're meaning to reach out, because, there's an opportunity there. So again, it's making sure that you, I suppose, in summary, you going into every call with the objective of taking something away from every call.
Yeah, nice. And that's what I was just looking for. Yeah, for that, because I think that's sometimes what people are unsure of, isn't it? Is like, okay, well, I called this person last time and then nothing really happened. So like, what do I call them about? What's the reason for my call? So I think, so thank you for sharing that. And then I guess the other part then is so let's say you did all of that, they give you that job, they deliver, it's a company that you've mapped out on and confident are on the right track, there's growth. What I don't know, how do you then think about sort of building on that relationship? Like, I don't know, what are things that we need to deliver? That's going to obviously really start building this relationship. But I don't know, anything else that has really helped you in the past take a relationship where it's maybe a bit transactional to start to sort of solid?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to me, for me, where it's being as thorough as possible from that initial job order, because given the opportunity, sometimes when you get given the opportunity to take a job order, they're giving you the opportunity, but they don't really want to give you the opportunity, because they're not willing to sit down and spend the right amount of time to tell you what they actually want. They go, you've got the job spec, don't you? 15% sounds all right, doesn't it? All right, look, what do you need to know? But it's, I suppose, just kind of taking control early on of that job order, and really trying to understand and get as much information about the business, because essentially, you are a brand ambassador for that company when you work on their behalf. You're the one that's out there selling that, and that also helps as well when you're looking to headhunt people, because the better you can sell an opportunity, the more interested you're going to have people that are essentially in that opportunity. So from day one, it's, I suppose, it's making sure you're setting up the meetings, unless it's thrown upon you, but you're setting them up with an object, a kind of a couple of objectives that you want to achieve on that call, as part of the job order process. Digging deeper on not just necessarily what is now the need right now, but what it looks like in the future. And it's just cultivating, brilliant. After you've done the placement, lots of people will be like, invoices sent now, past the rebate, brilliant. But it's about keeping those touch points open, just checking in with you. How's so and so settling in right now? You know, what impact have they had in the team? Keeping on the radar, brilliant. Oh, by the way, are you looking for anyone else in the future? You know, what's you know, just trying to find out what's exciting is happening in the business. Because you know, lots of times they'll be really happy to tell you these things, but people just don't ask the questions, you know, and people, especially when people, you know, are passionate about the businesses that they're working in, you know, it's like, oh, actually, you know, it's funny you should ask that because something really exciting is happening just around the corner. We're expecting to get all this new funding, you know, whatever that could be. But it's just, it's the place, it's keeping consistent after the placement. And you know, and just keeping those channels of communication, not so you become a hindrance, because obviously you do a good job and then you send them an email every week with speculative candidates, you know, that they're not hiring for. That can become a burden for them. That can become an annoyance for them. And I've had it in the past, you know, where the doors have shut because they said, look, brilliant, you gave us a brilliant candidate, but you're pissing us off now because you won't leave us alone. You know what I mean? And we've told you. So it's being pragmatic and practical about it as well. And just listening for those key indicators and just asking the right questions, I think. But yeah, the more questions you ask, the more you're going to know.
Yeah, no, awesome. So look, keen to talk about your business journey so far in the last sort of 15 minutes or so. But I know we've kept this really practical, which I think is great and will really help people listening to this. The final thing that I'd really like to go sort of practical on is self-management, time management, prioritization, whatever you want to call it, is something that, again, speaking to so many recruiters, has really come apparent that a lot of recruiters can struggle with this. And I think what's really happened, which we were talking before this, that people have got really busy. Maybe not everyone, so if you're not, sorry. But a lot of people have said that they've got really busy. So now it's like, oh my God, like, what do I need to prioritize that's going to enable me to hit my goals, and just getting better at that. And every time I speak to sort of top billers and high performers on this, they've really got this nailed down. And I think if I think early back when I started, and maybe you can agree or not, but that's definitely something that typically I don't remember getting any support on it. I just had to learn the hard way and find out what other people did. Did they do email reminders, and like how did they structure their day, and just learn as I went. So I guess a lot of people, and a real common question I get is, please, Hisham, can you ask top billers what their sort of daily schedule look like, or what their structure look like when they're at the top of their game compared to when they're early on and maybe sort of still earning their stripes and finding it difficult. So what does self-management look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, you know, look, I'm completely honest, sometimes it's organized chaos. You know, sometimes there's like a lot more of a rigid structure to it. I mean, for myself, kind of looking back from maybe some of the kind of habitual changes that I've made throughout the time would be probably more around the just the basics of organization. So the calendaring things as well, setting tasks, setting reminders, because if I don't do that, I will forget. Yeah, I'm very much a paper-based guy, so I'll be scribbling down loads and loads of notes, and then I'm ripping that piece of paper off, and that's going over there, and then I've lost it. It's gone. You know what I mean? My wife's come into the room, or someone's picked it up and threw it away, and then I've lost that vital information. So it's being organized in terms of calendarization, putting things into schedules, and also, really importantly for me as well was making sure that I'm being putting as comprehensive notes as possible on write-ups in terms of everything that I've done, from the candidates through to the clients, conversations that I'm having with them, just so because it's very easy just to shorthand something and pop it on there and forget about something that might be important. But going back in terms of in terms of like the actual how to organize my day, I think historically I've tried everything. I've tried really, really strict day structures where from 9:30 to 10 o'clock I'm doing LinkedIn messaging, and from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock I'm doing this. And I always fail really hard at it, because naturally, you've got the best intentions going into something, but it's in recruitment, things change at the drop of a hat. All of a sudden a job order comes through, or you're on a candidate calls in, or something changes basically, which will deviate away from what you had intended. And because of that kind of rigidness sometimes in the goals that I'd set myself for the day, I'd walk away from that day and think, I've really failed that day.
And a shit day,
I didn't stick to my structure. So now I think when I look back to when I've been at kind of my best peaks of performance, so to speak, generally it's quite systematic in terms of knowing what I need to achieve for each individual client. And what I want to get out of a week, out of a kind of from a BD strategy. So when I look at that, I look at daily goals and weekly goals.
Okay.
So I would break things down like, okay, so I've got this job, and I've not got much coverage on it, so I need to find today. My target is to find 2 good CVs for that role that I want, or 2 good headhunts for that role that I want to get. I want to get shipped out, and then my wider goal for the week would be, okay, I want 2 new jobs as well. So I want 2 new clients. So I'm working on smaller goals and larger goals simultaneously, because if I say to myself, I'm going to get a job today, and I don't get that job today, I'm going to walk away from that day feeling really bad. But if I give myself that extra bit of breathing room and think on a weekly basis, okay, this is what I want to accomplish this week, then the peaks and troughs that you go through, hopefully, you'll get as close to, if not hitting or overachieving those goals that you've set out. I think in particular with the candidate stuff, it's what I used to fall into the trap of was probably not getting enough coverage on jobs. So I would go out to market with loads of enthusiasm, and I'd find them someone that I thought was really, really good, and then I'd send him off, and I'd think he's got the job, and then that would be that. For me, it's and then it turns out that they weren't as good as I thought they were, or for one reason or another, it wasn't a good fit for them, vice versa, whatever it may be. But now I would kind of work to a structure of, this is now my focus for this amount of time. So I'm going to do this. I've set myself a target of the 3 CVs. I'm not going to look at another search until I've got the 3 CVs, because then at least nice. I can walk away from that search with confidence that I've got 3 good people in the process, and that will give me enough time. With them, hopefully that would be. We used to work on a rule of 3, where this kind of, I don't know who created the statistics. I think my director literally made it up to make it sound better at the time. But it was always, if you can get 3 interviews for a role, you're like 90% higher chance of you filling it than if you just get 1 interview. And obviously, to kind of work towards that. So again, slightly long way of saying it, but of going around the houses.
Just really quickly, because I think this is like, I think the important part that you meant there is like you anchor the time to it, because I think what you can be quite susceptible to early on just overall is like you said, my goal is 2 CVs, but it's like, okay, well, how long am I going to give myself to get that? And I think you can fall down the rabbit hole then of like just doing one thing for like too long of a time. I don't know, do you like anchor a time? You mentioned there like
I would generally, I'll generally kind of set my objective for that day. And again, so I normally plan, the day before for the day ahead. So it's like the last 15 minutes of my day, it's like reflection on what I've done and what have I achieved. And it's kind of looking forward to what do I want to do tomorrow. But again, things are subject to change. Sometimes, things are outside your control. Things that seem easy aren't easy, and you have to. Sometimes you have to abandon ship, because your time naturally, especially when you're a consultant working for somebody else, there's a hell of a lot of pressure. There's a hell of a lot of pressure to deliver, because there's always that saying in recruitment, you're only as good as your last month, and you're always looking over your shoulder slightly to think like, okay, last month maybe wasn't as good as I thought, but this month's going to be very good. So it's just I suppose for me, it's just, in terms of allotting the time, it's either till you think you've done a good enough job, or until you've exhausted it enough to know that that's probably as much as you can do.
I think the key that you've said there is to make sure that you make space to like review.
Yeah.
Because instead of going, I'm not going to stop until I've got 3 interviews, like, okay, well, how long does that go on for? Like, you've got to, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Because sometimes I could just keep going, and then all of a sudden my whole week is spent on this job, and I've got 2 interviews rather than 3, but I haven't
Yeah,
reviewed and made time to prioritize anything else.
just to add to that, I mean, I do kind of pivot. So, I'll set myself an objective for that day, that this is going to be my focus client for the day, and I'm going to look to get coverage. But with that, naturally, by the way that we're interacting with candidates, whether it's via email, in-mail, LinkedIn messages, connections, and stuff like that, it's a bottleneck really. There's a lot of energy that goes in, and what comes out doesn't necessarily come out straight away. So even you can sit there at the end of the day and you can think, geez, I didn't even manage to reg one person today, and kind of give yourself a hard time. But the work that you've done will come and pay back, and pay for itself in the days to come, because that bottleneck will start to unjam, and you get those candidates that you sent a message to a couple of days ago that maybe overlooked it, or maybe it's just more an appropriate time to then reply, to then start coming back to you. So yeah, when I say that my objectives are to get the 2 CVs, my objectives more are to work the hell out of that position, and then probably the next day focus onto something else, because as I say, there's always a kind of lapse in time when you're dealing with people, essentially.
Sure.
Things don't happen at the click click of your fingers, unfortunately.
Yeah. So look, what I'm thinking, Nath, is that let's not half bake the business journey. Let's get you back on when further down. Like, we've spoken for a whole hour and gone real practical on. Obviously, you're still recruiting, right? So like, this is you. This is how you approach things. This isn't like employee now business owner. Like, you're smashing it out on your own. But I guess real quick, like, what has sort of happened so far, or what have you experienced so far as a business owner that you least didn't expect, maybe? And we'll ask that question.
Yeah, back office. I mean, it's something you take for granted, and you're thinking, well, it mustn't be that hard, to do these things. And it's just, there's a hell of a lot of stuff kind of happens when you flick that switch, and there's so many things you have to be mindful of. And for me, it just in the 4 months or so that I've been a business owner, it has been an absolute baptism of fire. I've had to think on my feet a lot quicker than I have done in the past. I've had to learn very quickly, and I've had to adjust. The positives that come away from that is, when your name's on the door, I suppose the kind of passion, enthusiasm you have really does kind of echo through to the people that you're engaging with, because it's your baby, essentially. So yeah, it's
been back office. So when you say back office, what do you mean? Are we talking accounts? Are we talking like just?
Yeah, I mean, it's all simple things. You come into a recruitment company, your first day, you've got your own mug sat there, you've got your laptop set up, you've got your email account all done, all your logins are sorted, and that's all taken care of. And brilliant, I'm going to log in here, I'm going to get to work. But obviously, it's the negotiating behind that, it's all the invoicing, it's praying to God that people pay you on time, because obviously in recruitment, if you're working for somebody else, regardless if they pay or not, you're getting your commission check the next month.
Yeah, you forget that, don't you? Even if the invoice hasn't been paid yet.
Yeah, exactly. Any good recruitment company is going to pay you regardless. So it's more just kind of like sitting on your hands, being very patient and stuff, and just trying to manage all the noise, because as well, I'm always on the selling end of when I have worked for somebody else, and now I'm very much on the receiving end as well, where there's a lot of people with a lot of services, a lot of improvements, and a lot of chats, virtual coffees that people want to have to improve my business performance and X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it's a bit of a minefield at times, but it's been a good journey so far.
No, nice. As I said, we'll get you back on and we'll really dive into that. But look, I've got some quick fire questions to finish this. But before I do, you've correct me if I'm wrong, but have you always been a perm recruiter?
Yeah, so predominantly throughout my career has been perm. I've dual desked on various occasions. If someone gives me a contract, I'll bite your hand off, for it. But yeah, predominantly just perm. But my kind of talent, my strategy is permanent.
Yeah. So before I go into these quick fire questions, the question I wanted to ask you was, what do you think is like the most important thing a perm recruiter needs to master, and why?
I would say candidate control. Yeah, because I think contract recruiters they are a special breed, especially very good contract recruiters. Everything is so fast paced and so fast moving. But so are the interviews. Sometimes as a contractor, they go in for a 15-minute chat and they walk out with a job getting paid £500-600 a day. Whereas you could have someone on the permanent that only wants 30 grand and they'll have to go through 5 stages of interview process, because they're becoming a permanent member of that team. So it's being really, really thorough with the candidate acquisition process. So from how you engage with them to really asking, as I say, and not shying away from those tough questions, the stuff that you don't want to hear. And I suppose really, really importantly as well, is constantly, and I can't stress enough, really going back over and being as thorough as possible with what else they've got going on, because things change very quickly. And you can ask them on the Monday, what other interviews have you got? Have you got anything that you expect to turn into an offer? And they say, no, everything's at the first stage. As you speak to them on a Tuesday and have accepted an offer. So it's trying to open them up and as I say, be as personal as possible, so that they're forthcoming with that information. They don't feel that you're prying that for your advantage. But the best way you can help people is by understanding them, and understanding their needs as best as possible. Because as I say, they could have, you could have a really, really good opportunity for them, but time is on your side. So it's just trying to understand that as best as possible. One just random bit of advice as well, and this is it's always stuck with me, and it's not relating to anything you've just mentioned there. But I think throughout my recruitment journey, what I did a lot was look over my shoulder and look at other people in other desks that were doing really well, and always kind of think, why is that? I go, they've got a really good market. They've fell on their feet. They've just gone into a really high paying market that does really well. And, it's nothing, it's not them that's doing well, it's the marketplace and everything like that. And as I've grown and as I've seen, every market has the potential to be as good as the one next to you. It's just about how you approach that market and how you work that market. And it's very easy to try and compare yourself to the person next to you, but you're not the person next to you. So I think it's really important that you're always just really focused on what you're trying to achieve. Obviously, take advice from your peers, look to them for aspiration, advice as much as possible. But yeah, don't be disheartened when you see someone land a 30k deal when your average AOV is 6-7 grand, because that's luck of the draw. But again, it swings and roundabouts, and the longer you're in the game and the more consistent you are, and again, time in market is a massive factor in that. From what you can accomplish in 6 months to 18 months of being in the same market, it can be very much worlds apart, because the longer you're doing it, the more consistent you are, the better the results are going to be.
No, I love that. I really appreciate you being honest. Well, let's finish it there. I think that's a great way to end it. That's a great piece of advice, which I think sometimes people can learn the hard way and find themselves comparing. Yeah, I think we've heard it a lot, particularly from top billers, like really focus on yourself. Healthy competition, great, but you're the only person that can improve. And if you really focus on that rather than other people, then you're going to be in a good spot. But Nathan, really appreciate that. Thank you so much for got really practical with us, shared some really practical tips and advice. And I'm really excited to see how your business grows over the coming months and years. So thanks for coming on.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.